Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sanseveri with my ever awesome co-host, Amy Cornell. And kind of funny, we just before we started recording this podcast, I got an email from, I'm so excited, Amy. I got an email from Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing wanting to turn one of my books into a movie.
I feel like this is when we need sound effects. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, we need
the
sound.
Emmys music, from the Oscars or the Emmys or something.
Right, exactly. And the book that they want to turn into a movie is a book that is, initially I thought 10 years old, but I think it's probably more like 12 years old. And it's a book about how to get published, and they want to turn it into a movie.
But behind the scenes, we were talking about how riveting that would be. And I mentioned Penny and I would probably be the only people at, that screening, like, come down, we'll be the only ones on the red carpet, but we'll do our best.
Do you imagine like Ryan Reynolds, like, oh, how am I going to publish this book? And it would be riveting and so exciting. I don't even, so anyway, and Amy and I, when we were in the green room, she's like, oh, you should write them back. So I wrote them back. I said,
Yep.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. Please tell me more. And what really cracked me up is that the email came from, so the address is submissions.amazon@gmail.com. And I love
super legit,
right? And Amy pointed out that there's an address at the bottom. Like, Amazon's best kept secret is their address, because they don't want authors showing up like, where are my book sales, or where
I know, right? With pitchforks and
or you screwed up my cover or something like that.
So, I know. So if anybody wants to visit KDP, just let us know. We'll send you the address.
It's just, and they want to do it. This is my absolute, I don't know if I have really a favorite part, because it's all kind of my favorite part, because it's just so stupid. They want to do a TV series or movie adaptation for the 2024-2025 calendar year. Like, we're already at the end. We're already in like the last weekend of the year, right? September, October, November, December. Like, that's like the last two. Nobody produce, unless you're doing it on your iPhone and it's your cat doing something crazy. Nobody's producing a legitimate movie in 3 or 4 months. That's just not happening.
I know. Yeah, I can't wait to see what they say. And y'all, we'll report back on this on a future episode, just because hopefully nobody is responding to these, but some people probably are. There's definitely a sense out there, Penny, that authors want to succeed. Like, there are big dreams out there, and we completely understand it. And that's what these kind of scams are preying on, for sure.
Well, and I think that, and this kind of leads into the discussion that we're having today. I think that we as a community can stop this if we stop responding to them. Right. Mm-hmm. So if they get, this is a numbers game for these people, right? They send out 10,000 of these emails. How they got my email, I have no idea, but whatever. They send out 10,000 of these emails, and if they only get one to respond, and let's say they tell this person, oh, it's $12,000, and you'd have to, because you're going to have to pay a fee, right? At the end of this is a PayPal link, and some kid in Eastern Europe or wherever in the world who's scamming, or maybe a group of people, I don't really know, but are winding up with this cash. It's just a numbers game for these people.
Yep, exactly. It's wild.
But we have to, as authors, I know we all like, if somebody said, I'm going to turn your book into a movie. Now, for me, forget published today. If somebody says, I want to turn your book into a movie, the first thing that I do is I just freaking laugh out loud, because that's not a book that would ever be a movie, ever, ever, ever. But, for some authors, that's their dream, right? And well, I
Right.
talked to an author last week, and he was telling me, he's like, I want my book to be turned into a movie. And I'm like, dude, I got nothing. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
we can help you promote your book, but the rest is kind of up to whatever, what this book does on its own. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But in that vein, we wanted to do a conversation about publishers. And we've had conversations about publishers before, but I had a call with an author that's working with us, lovely person. And this author is working with a publishing company. And the reason for the call was, this author said to me, I'd really like to kind of, maybe do this on my own. I don't know if I can. It seems really daunting, right? It seems really
Mhm.
daunting. But this person has a number of books out with a publisher, with a hybrid independent publisher. And I said, well, what is it costing you now to publish the book? Because I'm assuming there's a fee. And he said it was, what was the number that I gave you? Was it $6,000 a book or something, or $8,000 a book?
$6,000 a title. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was floored. And basically, and I got to tell you, basically they were doing the bare minimum for this author. But the problem with this is that people who go this route a lot of times are busy, right? They're busy people. They're like, I don't have, this seems really daunting. I don't have time to figure this out. In fact, I did a coaching session with an author last week, and who's in the same situation. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And as I started to break it down about what you are actually responsible for, and, the process is actually really very easy, it kind of made more sense, and it felt less daunting. So part of it is that these publishers, and I want to just preface this by saying that we don't hate publishers at all. And some of them do great, they do really, really great work, but some of them are just, I don't know, they feel a little predatory, frankly. I mean, is that too strong a word, Amy?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think I like to give a lot of them the benefit of the doubt. And I do kind of frame it this way for some of our clients that run into challenges a little late in the game in terms of what they realize their limitations are, et cetera. But publishers, for the most part, produce a book, get it to market. And that is very much a lane. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think so much else of what makes so many gray areas, what makes this tricky, the challenges that come up for authors is when these assumptions about all these other things that publishers are expected to be good at when an author goes looking for a publisher. And I think that's where a lot of it gets lost in translation. And a lot of these publishers are businesses, right? So if somebody comes and says, I want to make a book, I want you to do it. I mean, can we fault them for saying yes? I
Right.
think there's so many different elements of this that just are out of whack and out of line that I do agree with you. Some of them are just out there doing the wrong things and they don't seem to care, which just infuriates me. But I think there are a lot of them out there that have a business plan. They have, you know what I mean, service offerings, and it's kind of built from there in a way that is not necessarily in the author's best interest anymore.
Right, exactly. And we've worked with a couple of really good publishers. And when we say, so just so you know, the placeholder term publishers for this particular podcast, what we refer to is a hybrid or an indie publisher, right? So a publisher that helps to facilitate the process of getting your book formatted and done and cover done and everything, and then get it onto Amazon. And we work with several of them that are really, really good, and they do great covers. But the problem is I think that a lot of times authors assume that so you find a publisher, and what happens is that somehow, like this, during the intro in this podcast, somehow I got on this list, and these fake Kindle people scamming me, right? Got my email address. So these lists are out there, and you will wind up on a list. I mean, sometimes all you have to do is register for a writer's conference or something. And I don't know how they get these email addresses so fast, but they do. And you get an email like, okay, well, we're a publishing house and we're going to do everything. So you don't have to worry about it. We're going to do editing, cover design, marketing, all of the things. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's great, because I don't have time for any of that. And then the reality kicks in, and you find out that they just started up a week ago or whatever. They don't really have, the covers are not great, but you don't really know that, because you as the author are assuming that because they have a shingle out and they're a publisher, that they know all the things. And unfortunately, Amy, you and I have seen that just doesn't happen. I mean, not consistently. It's inconsistent enough that it warranted doing a show on it.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, and again, as you said, Penny, it's very appealing, right? If you're an author, you just finished writing your book, like it's a lot of damn work. And so somebody saying, we can do all the things, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like the clouds part and the light shines through and you're like, thank God, but just because it's offered doesn't mean, and this is across the board in this industry, just because somebody says they can do all the things doesn't mean that they're going to be great at all the things. And they may not be great at things that your particular book, your market, your topic, your brand needs either. So just because somebody's a good fit for one author doesn't mean they're a great fit for another author in an entirely different market. So that's where it also gets tricky, is that it's not always so cut and dry. This one's good, this one's bad.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that if your only takeaway from this is that, don't assume that the publisher knows all the things just because they've said, well, we can publish your book, because getting a book to market is really just a matter of pushing a button. I mean, getting a completed book to market is really just a matter of pushing a button, honestly. If you want to work with a publisher, and we don't begrudge you that at all, but if you want to work with a publisher, ask them smart questions. And I think one of the first things that you should do too is look at the other books that they've published and look at those covers, right? And then look at covers, similar, similar genre covers on Amazon, and see how they kind of match up, right? One of the things that we know is that if a publisher doesn't have a good cover designer, your cover probably is going to be substandard as well. And some magical person isn't going to fall out of the sky to make your cover this best selling. And I think that's the first thing, is take a look at their website, see what other books they have, see what those, look at those covers. And then as you're looking through those books, jot down the authors' names and reach out and contact them, because authors are very willing to tell you, here's my experience flat out, here is where here's where they really failed. Here's where I wish that they would have done more. So I think the first piece of this is you have to do your due diligence, and also remember that if a publisher's coming to you promising all those things, they're usually not good at everything. Like, we're not good at everything, right? I mean, we really have our lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We get asked to do things all the time that we have to tell authors like that. We don't specialize in that. There are groups that specialize in that. That is not us. We encourage you to, interview those people. This is what we're great at. This is how we can help you. And I think you're totally right, Penny. Like looking at the kind of books that a publisher is producing is so important, because, like we talked about, a lot of these publishers have evolved with the industry to include, okay, we do editing, and now we do cover design, and now we do marketing. And they do that to stay competitive. And again, we can't begrudge them that. They are also a business. But when, as you said, think about if you weren't using a publisher, how would you do this? Would you only interview one cover designer and go with that person? Would you only interview one editor and then instantly, send them money? I would hope that's not the case. If you were doing this and hiring people that specialize in certain areas, I'd like to think that you would be looking at a few different options, checking out their portfolios, looking at their reviews and recommendations, all those kind of things. And when you go with a publisher, you don't get to do any of that vetting. You know what I mean? So you're putting a lot of trust that they have all of the top-notch people for all the things. And, as you said, Penny, that's just typically not the case. Most places can't be excellent at everything. And I think it's worth asking, like you said, ask smart questions. Ask what the terms are for the cover design, for the editing. We have a client right now that's had to go through a couple different editing processes, and they used a hybrid publisher to start with.
Yeah.
And then they got feedback from the market, from readers, that there were serious problems with the editing, and like how disastrous is that to think you were in the right hands to find out after the fact that there were quite a few things that were missed. And it's the same thing with covers. We work with clients all the time that once their book we talk to them long before their book comes out, the book comes out and it's kind of a bummer. It's like, ooh, the cover is definitely not excellent. Even, we were hoping, we were like, oh, I hope this cover is going to be great. This is such a great story. This author's incredible. They have, a plan. And then it's so sad when a cover gets slapped on a book that is not doing it justice. And it really wasn't in the author's control because they're working with a group that handles all of the things for them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's so discouraging. I think that and that's part of the reason why reaching out to authors who are showing up on their website is always a good idea, because you'll get a really good sense of what their experience was with all of the pieces. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that a lot of times I feel, and believe me, I understand how overwhelming the industry can seem. But a lot of times I think that an author really wants to go with a publisher because they want that hand-holding, right? They want somebody to kind of handhold them and guide them through the process. And most of these places are not structured and don't have the staff to do that, right? So so the idea is you say, you get them your book, they do all the things, and then they're pretty much done, right? And you mentioned this, Amy, that we had a client who's with a publisher, and they were, I guess, so done with her that they were going to charge her to make updates, because we had made some book description recommendations. They were going to charge her to make updates to her book description. So that's another thing that you have to ask them too, right? So if they upload the book to Amazon, they own that. I mean, you may still have the rights to the book, but they essentially own that, your files, right? So you want to ask them if you want to make changes, or if you want to do. I talked to an author, actually, I forgot to tell you this, last week. And I say he's with a publisher. He has a publisher. And I said, this book could really benefit from some A+ content. And he says, yeah, he goes, I asked my publisher and they didn't really know what it was. So I'm like, well, okay. And I didn't know it. And I didn't really know what to say to that, because I was like, okay, well, it's really important. I mean, I didn't want to go through the whole spiel and but I mean, you really want to make sure that, yes, if you want the help, that's great. If they're going to do a great job for you, that's great. But what can you realistically expect from them? And, if you're buying marketing, is their marketing more than just a press release that's sent out over the wire that literally nobody's going to see? And I'm sorry to put it that way, but I mean, let's face it.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. You need to ask about what kind of marketing it is. And then also, how long does this last? How long do I have access to you? And that may seem like an awkward question to ask and inappropriate, but it's not. I can tell you right now, it's not an inappropriate conversation to have with a potential publisher, because we see it all the time. ask them what the terms are, what the parameters are for getting their ongoing help and support to support your brand, and to support your product, because I had never heard that before, Penny, when our client, and her book has not even been out for, I don't think her book had even been out for 3 months yet. So we're talking a pretty new book. And she said, yeah, I can't, they said they'll only make updates to my description for a fee. And I almost fell off my chair. I have never heard that before. I've heard authors say that like they can't get their publisher to respond to their email, which is scary enough as it is. But to outright say like, yeah, we can do that, but for a fee. It's like, wow, okay, that would probably have been something that, an author would want to know going into it. If you ever want to change anything about your book in the future, it's going to cost you money. Like,
Yeah.
you do not have a right to do that. That is an added service. And that's really something you have to consider. Like, is the convenience of having some of these things taken care of for you at the beginning worth the potential cost down the road to keep improving on your platform and your product and your retail presence and things like that? It's a really important decision to make.
Yeah, it is an important decision. I absolutely agree with that. And I think that, in terms of costs, more, more is not better. Sometimes it's just more. So
Right.
a publisher that charges you, like this author that we have who charged $6,000, you would
Still
think,
can't hear that without getting mad.
I know, I know, I got so mad when I was on, and such a nice guy. And I just got so mad when I was on the phone with him. And you would think that for $6,000, I mean, that's not a small amount of money, right? You would think that for $6,000, they would be doing all the things, but basically, his hands were tied in terms of his book access.
Mhm.
They did like one cover, here's your cover. And that, I mean, it was this crazy. So more doesn't,
Oh, and Penny,
what?
can I throw in this? Can I throw in this too? Because this is something else that you and I discussed around this particular client too, is that, and I think a lot of authors, and you mentioned it a little bit with the hand holding, but what a lot of authors don't realize, he got zero branding or platform support or education either,
Yeah.
and zero input on who his market was and who this book should be, what I mean, marketed to. I mean, he was really going out there blind. And I only bring that up because, you and I both said, like, what was the publisher thinking with this and where was their direction and what, what I mean? And he had no idea. And
Yeah.
I just could not believe that that this publisher was handling it this way and that this author went through multiple titles and with zero education support, what I mean, market insight, none of that. And I think a lot of authors expect to have that.
Yeah.
And he paid a lot of money and got none of it. And I mean, not that it was promised to him and he didn't get it, it just didn't even exist. And that also left me dumbfounded.
Yeah, it was so discouraging in so many ways. And that's the other thing though, too, is that a lot of times authors will come, and I talk to authors, and this happens a lot, where they're not really sure what they're not really clear on who their market is, who their reader market is. They're not really clear on they kind of know their genre, but they don't really know their genre. Before you design a book cover, you need to know who you're designing the book cover for. Like, I can't even imagine. And so this publishing company is just like throwing all these book covers out there without even having he had no conversation with them whatsoever. I know it, we could go on like this for an hour. It absolutely infuriates me. And I think that before you pay a premium for the convenience of one-stop shopping, make sure that the benefits don't end there, right? Make sure that you're not going to end up with a subpar product, that there aren't too many restrictions on your book, and that you're going to get some guidance in terms of, book covers. And, here's a red flag too. Like if you're working with a cover designer at a publishing house and they haven't asked you, what other covers in your genre do you like? Because typically a cover designer will start with you, just they want to get a sense of what, like a true cover designer is not really going to help you with your genre, but a cover designer who's, a publishing house that brings in a cover designer, I mean, they should be having that conversation. But a cover designer will typically say, send me some other covers that you like, right? Just to kind of get a sense of what your vibe is, right? And that was never happening in his case with his publisher. And again, it just makes me so mad.
I love that idea, Penny. That is such a great tip that is so simple, but so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Find, and I tell this when I do coaching with authors who are trying to decide on a book cover, I say, let's go look at, and sometimes we'll do a screen share. I was like, let's look at other covers that you like. In fact, I did coaching with an author yesterday who's a listener. So hi, if you're listening. And we were talking about their book cover. And, I went on to Amazon and I said, here's where I think, and this person was extremely open to feedback, which is always awesome. Here's what I think, and really kind of get not just the vibe of the author, but what the reader's going to resonate with. And sometimes the one-stop shop just isn't, that isn't really worth it. I mean, not to I used to have a friend of mine, and her boyfriend would do Christmas shopping at the last minute at 7-Eleven. Right. I mean, that's a bad example of a one-stop shop, but sometimes a one-stop shop can feel like this author that we led with can feel like you're Christmas shopping at 7-Eleven, right? Here's your energy drink. I mean, you know what I mean? You have minimal choices and it's easy, but it's not necessarily the best thing for your book. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so we hope that this show has been helpful. Amy, I'm sorry, you were trying to say something. Go for it.
No, I'm just agreeing. And now I feel like I need an energy drink. I know. I just dropped. But no, I hope this is helpful, because we see this a lot. And I think I've said it before, like, we wouldn't harp on these things if they weren't real life issues for lots of authors that we talk to. And believe me, we are not talking about random obscure publishing, options that you're never going to find, you know what I mean, that are hidden on page 12 of the Google machine or anything like that. Like, just because they're big and they're out there doesn't mean they're a good fit for you. So as Penny said, we're not slamming all of them. There's some great ones out there. And again, just because it's good for one author doesn't mean it's good for you either. So try to look past the convenience of it and really think long-term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that if you find a publisher who is really more of a book shepherd, I used to know a book shepherd years ago, and she was absolutely top-notch. And she would basically shepherd the author through the process, which really, when it comes down to it, that is really what the majority of authors need, right? The majority of authors who feel like they're overwhelmed, they just need somebody to help guide them through the process. Because once you publish your first book, and any of you who are listening who have multiple books out, you know that a lot of us cut our teeth on our first book, right? By the time the second book rolls around, you're like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do it now, because now my first book, I remember, was a disaster. Of course, now Amazon apparently wants to turn it into a movie, but whatever. But and every what?
No, I love it. That's hilarious.
Every single time that you publish a book, you learn, and it is a learning process. So I hope that this show has been helpful. We love your feedback, your show feedback. We would love a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can't get it up on the podcast portal, send it over to us. We'll pop it up on the website. Show ideas are always welcome. And I want to thank you again so much for listening. This is Penny Sansbury and Amy Cornell, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.